Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Komulski, and I'm your lecturer for this fifth tutorial for Leadership Studies 1 CLC. The title of today's tutorial for today, October the 22nd, 2014 at 1500 in the afternoon, is the formation of a leader's storyline. Today, we are going to go through the following things, and I'll leave this up for a moment to see if anyone joins us live before we jump into our material. As I said, our topic for today is the formation of a leader's storyline, with the subheading Leadership Flows Naturally from Understanding Your Story's Narrative. And so we're going to go over four things today in this tutorial, even though it's near the end of the term. This is our final tutorial as well. We're going to first begin with a short video clip by a wonderful author by the name of Donald Miller, who writes a lot on story. And the clip is called, Are You Living a Good Story with Your Life? That's going to lead into a little bit of lecture and just teaching that I will do in this format, as well as it being online in your lessons templates on what story is, looking a little bit at story structure and vocabulary. All of this is to help you begin to enter into a tool that we will speak some in depth on today, called Developing My Storyline. I'm going to walk you through this PDF, because that PDF and the way, the degree to which you spend some time with it over the next week is going to deeply prepare you or not prepare you if you don't do it for assessment number 3, which is a video upload reflection of your storyline and storyboard. Lastly, for today, and really sort of for the end of this course, at least in the tutorial format, we're going to read a short reflection again by Donald Miller, who just wrote a blog recently entitled Your Growth May Threaten Others, But Grow Anyway. And I thought that was a great way to sort of wrap up this portion of this class. So I'll give a moment to see if anybody else jumps online live. And then I'll greet you just face-to-face, or at least face to your video screen, and we'll jump into material today. So again, greetings, welcome, and we will talk to you soon. Again, welcome everyone to your final tutorial. My name is Chris Komulski, and I've been privileged to be a lecturer and the host of these tutorial sessions throughout this term. And just want to welcome you today. I'm excited about the material today. I love stuff on story, and I'm ready for us to jump into that material and hopefully prepare you for your final major assessment of this term. I'm going to jump to our video now, and we will move forward from there. So it's good to see you. I hope that you get a chance to watch this, and welcome. Sorry, everyone, hold on a second. I am just fiddling with the video thing. Give me 1 moment. Sorry for this.
I think most of us just kind of let life happen to us. I mean, we're born and our parents send us to school, you know, then we go off to college. We know we're supposed to get married, so we look for a mate. And we try to find a career that we can make some money at and pay a mortgage and that sort of thing. But we're not super intentional, right? We don't believe that, we have as much control over our own fate as we actually do. I hear a lot of people talking about destiny, and what I just mentioned, fate. I can tell you, I think we have a lot more control over our lives than that. When I worked with some filmmakers to make a movie out of a memoir I'd written, I had to fictionalize the story of my life in order to make it fitting for screen. And what I learned in that process of editing my own life to make it more interesting was that real life characters, people like you and me, who tell great stories with their lives, have something in common. One is they know what they want. A character that wants something makes for a great story. I mean, Frodo wanted to destroy the ring to save Middle-earth, right? Harry wanted Sally, and Sally wanted Harry, apparently. And if we know what we want and it's very clear, our lives are going to make a lot more sense. And then if what we want is sacrificial, if what we want is good for our families, for other people, that also makes a much more fulfilling story. And here's another part. If the thing that we want is very difficult to attain, if there's a lot of conflict in our story, conflict actually brings meaning into our story. So those hard days that we have, a lot of times they're hard because they're hard, and yet what we want is not very meaningful. If what we wanted was more meaningful and sacrificial, then the conflict actually makes more sense, and it's a lot more easy to bear. Those are some of the elements of a great story. And what I want you to know really is that you can plan your life. You can actually sit down with a piece of paper and say, these are the things that I want. This is the conflict that I anticipate is going to happen as I pursue the things that I want. It's not going to surprise me. And at the end of a year or a decade, or at the end of your life, when the credits roll, you'll have a great sense of meaning and fulfillment because you've lived a terrific story with your life.
So obviously you'll see that this content is from a book of Donald Miller's that he released in 2009 called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. I highly recommend the book. Again, he wrote it in response to some screenwriters coming to him and saying, we'd love to make a movie about one of your first books, which was largely a memoir of his. So they were saying, we want to make a movie about your life. And yet, as I got into that screenwriting process, they came back to him and said, your life is too boring. We need to edit your life to make it work for screen. And so Donald Miller had the strange experience of being able to help edit a fictional version of himself. And while he was learning what that process was like, sort of as he was learning about story, he was struck over and over and over again by the power that was found in seeing your life through a narrative perspective. And seeking to become a better story or tell a better story about a character in a novel or in this case in a screenplay provoked him to lead a better life, period, in his actual life. And so we're kind of taking that perspective today as we work through a bit of material here on Storyline. Give me a moment to switch to our first slide and we will go from there. What I want you to see, I hope you can see this on the majority of your screen to try to make it as large as possible, but understand that I'm losing a bit of resolution, is a very typical structure that anyone who works with the sort of typical arc that any story narrative takes sees happen. Now, you might say that I've learned something in a Bible class or in a creative writing class or something like that, where there have been 3 acts or 4 acts or 5 acts to any good story. And honestly, that's not really the point today. The point is to look at typical structure found within story and then apply that to the narrative of our lives as we are developed and formed by God to be leaders who can make an impact. And so very simply, just by way of like 1-minute introduction on this, a story starts in Act 1 by the introduction of characters and a situation. There's a reason why almost all stories, be they movies, TV shows, cartoons, video shorts, music videos, or even a story that's someone telling you, starts with an introduction. And it starts with the classic Once Upon a Time. And a character is brought into the story. We call the main character in a story a protagonist, and we call the main villain or person that is against the main character in a story an antagonist. So a protagonist is introduced, possibly an antagonist as well, and then a situation. And that's why at the start of movies in particular, you often find a long tracking shot where a camera swoops down into a neighborhood and then into a street and then into a house, and we see our main character. Now, the introduction to a story ends with something that we call an inciting situation or an inciting incident. Please hear that I did not say the word exciting, and if you see that on your screen, the word is spelled I-N-C-I-T-I-N-G, not exciting. What is an inciting situation or an inciting incident? It is a doorway through which the protagonist cannot return. So again, I point you to movies just as an example of this to say, think about how many movies begin with the main character walking literally through a doorway or around a corner or beginning a journey or something like that. And it's sort of metaphorical, and yet it actually happens. The movie starts as the character steps through the doorway. So Miller, in that little clip we just saw, mentioned Frodo and his quest to take the ring to Mount Mordor. And what's fascinating about that is that the story doesn't really begin until Frodo steps outside of the door of his house, which was safety and security represented in the Shire. Once a character does that, they cannot return. And so Act 2, which is the majority of most stories, is almost entirely about rising action and rising tension. The protagonist tries over and over and over again to solve whatever problem, whatever situation, whatever struggle, whatever desire is presented in the inciting incident. And that builds and builds and builds and builds and builds until Luke is fighting not only Darth Vader, but what he also realizes, Darth Vader, but what he also realizes is his long-lost father in Empire Strikes Back. And we have a climax. The movie swells, the music swells, the main characters finally come into confrontation with each other, often physically. The guy finally risks and puts his hand out for the girl, and we're trying to see whether the girl will receive his invitation for romance. And a climax where the drama and the main questions of the story are brought to a head. And then essentially when that happens, when the climax is resolved, the story has resolution and ends. So that, in brief, is a very brief introduction to story. Now, let me skip to a one-page PDF that I've uploaded for you, and that is part of your lesson template for the section on the formation of the storyline within your lessons. And I just want to say a little bit further about what story is, and then talk to you about why we're spending so much time on that today. So give me a second to switch, and we'll move forward. So you see that we just spent some time walking through this diagram by means of an introduction to what story is. I want to now give you one of the most helpful definitions of story that I have ever found. You have them that range from the very simple to the very complex. But again, and here's one of the reasons why we're spending some time on it today, I love Donald Miller's definition of story, because he says, and you see it right here, that if you can see that little hand that I'm pointing at, he says a story is a character who wants something and overcomes conflict to get it. Again, what is the definition of a story? A story is a character who wants something, who expresses desire, and then overcomes rising conflict and opposition to achieve or overcome or reveal or find whatever they are looking for. You see on this page, and again, I would just encourage you to download it, because we're going to use the story vocabulary to work through an assessment called, a thing that leads to our third assessment. And so you'll see that there's a lot of story structure vocabulary on this page. I'll let you read through that on your own. The one that I want to just point your attention to that I mentioned, which is incredibly interesting and important to any good story, is that of the inciting incident. Again, what is an inciting incident? It's a doorway through which a protagonist cannot return or go back. Protagonist being the lead character in the story. You'll see some other definitions here of positive and negative terms, which are good or bad things that happen to the protagonist in a story, the scenes that form the setting by which a story takes place, something called a crisis decision, which leads directly into the climax, which I've already spoken about, the height of the story arc, where the main conflict is brought into resolution, and then resolution. Now again, these are all adapted from a wonderful book by a very famous screenwriter in Hollywood called Robert McKee, and he wrote a book called Story, if you're interested in learning more about that. Now, all this is well and good, and if you are a story nerd like me, you might be going, this is interesting. I'm glad you're telling me a bit about this, but what the heck does this have to do with this course, and in particular with what I need to accomplish before the end of the term? I just want to finish. And so I want to kind of introduce to you the majority of what we'll spend the rest of the time doing today. This, again, is a lengthy, reflective exercise that is incredibly powerful in helping you order and narrate and chronologically think through the story of your life, the narration or the storyline, if you will, of your life. And so what I want to do is put up this tool. I call it Developing My Storyline, and walk you through it for a few moments now. So let me do that. So what is a storyline? A storyline, if you see here, this is just a simple definition taken from just an online dictionary. A storyline is the plot of a novel, play, movie, or other narrative form. Basically, it's what happens to a character in a story. Again, what does Donald Miller say a story is? A story is a character who wants something, that would be the storyline, and overcomes conflict to get it. Now, there's a scripture in Jeremiah 29:11 that is incredibly important here from a biblical perspective that helps us think through our storyline, particularly the plot that has already taken place in our life, i.e. our past. Very famous verse that's often used to provoke hope in us for our future. But Jeremiah 29:11, Jeremiah the prophet writes, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord," obviously speaking for God. "Plans for wholeness and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." What I want to think about here is I want to think about what the Hebrew word for future here is, because obviously Jeremiah was originally written in Hebrew. And the Hebrew word for future, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, any of you that are Hebrew scholars, the Hebrew word for future is something like aharit. Why don't you say that out loud for me as you're watching this broadcast? Aharit. Come on, you're listening to your headphones, or you're on the bus, or you're in your bedroom. So say it loud. Aharit. Good. Now, what does this literally mean? What this word means literally is the destination or end of a journey. And so if you go kind of back up to the verse, essentially what this is saying is that God has an understanding and an idea and really the full picture for what the destination or end of your journey looks like and where you are going to go from today, well, actually the very first day that you were a thought within your parents' eyes, up until the end of days, in a sense. And essentially, and this was a very Jewish way to think about both the future and the past, what this word, this meaning of the word means is that aharit is talking about our future being directly connected to our past. And so some people that speak about Jewish culture and their concept of the future suggests that we walk backwards into our future while looking back at our past. And said another way, we view our future through the lens of our past. An image that might help you here if you're going, that's all well and good, but what does this mean? I want you to think about how a person rows a boat on a lake. Don't know if you've ever tried rowing a boat. It's quite a difficult exercise, and it seems counterintuitive at first because the way that you row a boat across a lake is by getting into the boat and sitting backwards, and with your back to the front of the boat, rowing. And the way that you don't row in circles is you pick a landmark or a fixed point that you look back at, and if you keep in line with that place, you will row forward straight. So the boat moves forward in a straight course by paying attention to the landmarks that are behind you. Now, bringing this to your story or your storyline, what I want you to do, and I'm going to give you a few moments to think about this now, is to think about significant landmarks in your storyline. What I want to do here is I want you to consider answering a few of the following questions. Don't feel like you need to answer all of these. All of these, on some level, are asking similar versions of the same question. And yet I find you jotting down a few ideas here to be incredibly helpful as we enter into this process of developing our storyline. So first question would be following with the movie theme, and that essentially asks you that if your life were a movie, who would its main characters be? You go, man, I don't want to do an icebreaker. No, man, just humor me for a second. Who would the actors and the characters be in your story? When did they enter the story? What was that about? I said it a completely different way. Who in your life has added color or texture to your life? Who has been a great supporting character, if you will? You see this PDF continues onto the next page and defines the idea of a landmark, which is basically an event, a discovery, or a change marking an important stage or turning point in something. This obviously being the definition of landmark that is not necessarily that physical landmark, right? I.e. there's a mountain there, Table Mountain, and I'm orienting myself around Cape Town by what part of Table Mountain I'm looking at. But we're talking about significant landmarks in your life. So again, some other ways to think about that as we consider the lens of our past, i.e. our storyline. What were some of the events that shaped your storyline positively or negatively? Was there something unique or significant to the people, place, or timing of your birth? I find this especially powerful for most Africans, as African culture in general has a deep sense of belonging and knowledge and understanding of the situations and circumstance around your birth and why you were named what you were named. And most of us have a story to tell about that if we were to be asked, tell me about your name and why you were called what you were called. And so I'm asking you now to consider if there is something significant to that tells you who you are. Were there times when you experienced growth, be it physical, emotional, intellectual, or spiritual? What was the catalyst or the reason behind that growth? Did somebody step into your life in a significant way? And then you see lastly on this page a huge list of a variety of roles that different people can play in your life, from parents and siblings to friends or coaches to mentors to bands to boyfriend girlfriends or husband and wives, classes and learning experiences, trips and holidays, neighbors, books, movies, music, etc. There are so many things that were influential in your life, and I want you to literally spend a little bit of time with a blank page of paper, i.e., as you see here, jotting down a few of these landmarks. Why don't you go ahead and do this now, pause this broadcast, and just spend some time thinking about the landmarks in your life. I'll give us a second in case anyone joins us live, and then I myself will move forward with this broadcast. Okay, I hope and trust that exercise was significant. What I would suggest, if you are thinking and wrestling through a landmark, whether it was a healthy or unhealthy situation in your life, I would love for you to share that with someone. So what I want to suggest right now is that you literally, again, pause this broadcast for a moment, take out your cell phone and text somebody or SMS somebody or WhatsApp somebody, just something you're thinking about right now if they are involved in that, and just tell them you're thinking about them, and use this as an opportunity to connect with somebody relationally, and we'll move into the development of your storyline in just a moment, which you see the instructions for on the third page of this PDF. Okay, what I want you to do is get the following things and then come together on a large table with plenty of flat space for you to spread out. This is an exercise that you need to use space in. And so please clear off space somewhere, whether it's your bed or a table or the kitchen or somewhere like that where you can work on this. And this tool, like I said, is called Developing Your Storyline. Ordering the chapters of your life in preparation to walk forward into your future. What I want you to do is I want you to get a large piece of paper, at least A3 in size, but the bigger the better so that you don't have to be real scrunched and you have freedom to order things around. So at least an A3 size of paper, A2 might even be a bit better. And I want you to get as many Post-it notes as you can. Now, what is a Post-it note for those of you that don't know? It's one of those little notepads that you can get that has a blank side that you can write on that usually is a color, often yellow. And then the back side has a little strip on the top of the Post-it note that you can pull off, and it's sticky and has a little bit of glue on it, and you can post it up on a wall. And so what I want you to do, if possible, is to get some of those Post-it notes. If you don't have access to that, take some scratch paper that is blank on at least one side and cut it up into little squares, and you can use that as well on your piece of paper. And what I want you to do now is to take as much time as you need to use the yellow Post-it notes, or whatever color you have, to brainstorm significant people, events, and sets of circumstances that have shaped your life. Literally, I am thinking about everything. Each item should be represented on one Post-it note, and I want you to try to keep writing things down on Post-it notes until you have at least 100 listed. Now you might say, that is so many. What are you talking about? And I want to just suggest to you that whether you are 18 years old or double that or triple that, you have more experiences than you can fit on 100 Post-it notes. You have more experiences this last week than you can fit on a note. And so 100 is just sort of a good round number. Now, what I want you to do as you do this and as you think about stuff is just literally to write a word or a symbol onto the page. And if you have enough, this is for you. Just stick it somewhere on this A3 piece of paper. Okay? Go ahead and do that, and you're going to go ahead and do that now. When you feel stuck, go back to those landmark notes, and I want you to pick a different category and start thinking from there. You'll be amazed that you'll suddenly realize that you have not talked about your biological family, or you have not spoken about that crazy thing that happened to you in grade 7, or one of the places you lived when you were a child because it was a difficult place. And so you're just going to begin recalling memories and writing them down in whatever way is helpful for you to remember. When you feel like you're ready to order, what I want you to do is to take your A3 piece of paper, and as you see right here, and I'm going to make this larger on the screen so you can see it. What I want you to do is to draw a line in bold writing across the top of the page with maybe, I don't know, a fifth or a sixth of the page left, and write the word titles on the top left, with obviously a line going all the way across the page in a horizontal way with an arrow indicating that your life is not over or done with. On the bottom, I'd like you to make a dashed line across the paper, and that needs to be probably about a fourth of the way up the paper, maybe a little bit less depending on how small or large you write. And I want you to write the word lessons. Go ahead and do that now. Titles on the top with a bold line, lessons on the bottom with a dashed line. By the way, as you're doing that, I just want to comment and say that this image here is a depiction of a typical storyline and sort of a visual representation of what a storyline looks like. You don't know yet what titles or lessons or blue Post-it notes or colored Post-it notes, frankly, other than yellow even are, but I'll explain all that as we go. This is, again, a very generic sort of stock way to think about what your storyline is. When you're done sort of ordering your paper, what I want you to do, I need to start to make this smaller, I'm sorry, is to go back up to step 2. And what you need to do is begin to put together the items of your life into columns, if you will. Sorry, there we go. It's a little easier to see. You need to put together the areas of your life in columns from birth over here on the left top to today over here on the bottom right. Obviously, your life is not done because you are alive. And so what I want you to do is start from left to right, top to bottom, and begin putting all of those Post-it notes into a chronological order from your birth up until what happened now. Do your very best to do that as best as you can. I would order them from top to bottom, left to right. So literally from the top of column, the first column on the left, all the way down to your lessons dash, and then start in the second column and go down, and you kind of weave up and down as you do that. Once you have ordered your life, what I want you to do is I want you to identify something that we call positive and negative turns. Now, we haven't spoken about that too much yet, and so what's important here is for you to understand what those are. Those are story structure vocabulary, so go back and think about that for a moment. But basically what positive negative turn is something where you're going to choose your Post-it notes that represent negative things, i.e. pain, suffering, struggle, loss, death, embarrassment, whatever. And you're gonna mark with a highlighter or a colored pen or pencil, or frankly a different colored instrument that you wrote with initially, but somehow indicate with color different items on your ordered chronological list that represent negative turns or pain and suffering, and ones that represent positive things or positive turns, which are significant accomplishments or good things that have taken place in your storyline. Again, in this example below, and I'll show you one of my own in a bit, you'll see that pink represents one of those things. I'm going to just assume for lack of a better sake, it represents positive turns, and green represents negative turns. Go ahead and do that now. Again, what is a positive and negative turn? Don't get confused too much. It's just a term within story structure vocabulary that talks about hard things and victories or good things. Go ahead and evaluate your Post-it notes now, marking those as you see fit. One thing I want you to keep in mind as you do that is that something that often happens within humanity is that things that were struggles for us, that we did not know what to do with, oftentimes through growth, through transformation, through the help of others, that becomes something that turns into a good and positive thing where I've grown. And so you might need to color several of your Post-it notes, both colors. Step 4 is called story structure markers, and I won't spend much time on this, but essentially to say, go back to the first page of this PDF and look at the story structure vocabulary, and what I want you to do is to make a symbol, and you see some examples of symbols that I have there on various Post-it notes. If the portion of whatever was happening in your story was an inciting incident or a crisis decision, a climax, or a resolution. Essentially what you're thinking of again is you're thinking about, how is my story being narrated and how am I responding to the God who is at work within my story? That leads us directly into step 5, which we call the voice calls out. And that is where you are going to turn to this large ordered piece of A3 paper that you have now colored in different ways, and you're going to go back and now you're going to circle things. You're going to circle moments when God, who is the writer or the voice of your story, as Donald Miller writes, spoke in your life. Now, that is often something we don't recognize in the moment because we don't have much practice with that, but I believe deeply that Scripture teaches that God speaks and is active. Hebrews talks about him being a living sword, that the Word of God is a living sword that has the ability to cut us to the place of bone and marrow. Jesus calls himself the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. God says that he is I am who I am, and that he has no start, he's always just been. And so whether you've recognized God's voice in your life or not, I want you to return to your Post-it notes right now and just essentially ask the question, where has God been? If there's a Post-it note or a section where you see God at work, whether it's in your past or currently, just make some sort of note about what God was doing as you were able. Then what you'll do is you'll return to your diagram, and in step 6, you'll move towards lessons learned. And what I want you to see here is I want you to see that you have a good chunk of space to look through the whole course of your life, right? And what you want to do is you want to start pulling out major life lessons or learnings. You're not going to be able to look at every single thing that's happened in your life, but big, big, big ideas. And I'll give you some examples of that with my own life in a minute. Essentially, you're writing 4 to 6 significant lessons, either positive or negative, that you have learned throughout your life as a result of what took place within your storyline. You're trying to sort of summarize, well, this is what it seems like are the major themes, the major issues, the major struggles, the major developments of my life, but not just in sort of a chronological book report fashion, but now with a sense of what can I learn from this? What is God trying to teach me as he shapes and forms my life? The last section of this story line is called chapter markers, and this references a section of your learning that we call how a leader is formed, the development of leadership development theory. And in that, Robert Coleman, the author, speaks about leadership development through the lens of phases or chapters that a person goes through throughout their life, decades, if you will, most of them being that long. And so what I want you to do is I want you to consider ordering one more time your Post-it notes that you have now messed around with several times. And I want you now to try to order them into major life development chapters. Now, again, just a major hint here, and you see that I put it in italics because it's really sort of that important. What I'm speaking about with this section is the large developmental chapters of growth in my life. Typically by the age of 30, there are 2 to 3 chapter markers at most. For most people, probably 2, maybe slightly into 3, because there are only 4 or 5 in a whole life. Not all major events are a change in chapters. Now, if you're going, what is he talking about? And you have not worked through Leadership Development Theory by Robert Coleman, that section will illuminate this pretty clearly, I believe. But you're basically going to title sections of your story, and again, when you are done, you should have something that looks somewhat like this as I make it larger again. Now, what is this tool about? Because this tool is actually not doing anything to count for anything other than preparation for your assessment. And so to do that, what I need to do is I need to jump over to your assessment number 3 and say something about that, and then I'll wrap up for today. You'll see right here that I have assessment 3 up, and essentially what you're going to do, and you can read on your own, but I'll say something about this very briefly, is you are going to use that whole process that I've walked you through, which is a major unit of learning in your lessons template, to create a 7-minute video presentation, both oral and visual, where you share your storyline, your life story narrative, if you will, and your storyboard, sorry for the typo there, following the formats described in class. Now just note that I haven't said anything about a storyboard yet. I'll say something about that right at the end here. Presentations will be uploaded to YouTube. If that is an issue for you because you're worried someone will hear you, or that you don't want to watch, that you don't want watching your videos, set to private viewing if you wish anonymity. And then you'll need to post that link to Funda. You may also do that through Vimeo, which is another large online video uploader. Or if you're really interested in privacy, you can do it through an application called Google Drive, which is basically a Google version of Dropbox, or sharing of files where you can send video links to someone. And essentially for this assessment, you'll need to do that to get me a video link that is playable. Now, I said you're going to be speaking for about 7 minutes, so you're going to have to figure out how to record yourself in a way that you can hear, in a way that I can see you. I'm not talking professional recording here, but I am talking about not having a train in the background that is impossible for me to understand what you're saying. Now, about 5 minutes of this 7 are going to be spent reflecting on your past storyline. So basically, the large process of reflection and learning and thinking that you have done, all is building to help you craft this 5 or so minute speech where you reflect on your storyline, basically what has happened so far in your life and what you are learning about it. And then after you've done that for about 5 minutes, which obviously is way too short of time, so you're not going to be able to tell your story from birth to death. You're going to have to hone in on a few important things. What I want you to do is to then look forward for a couple minutes, for 2 minutes, through the lens of what we call a storyboard. And again, I'll explain that very briefly in a moment. All presentations must include an image and a word-based explanation of your storyline and storyboard. Basically, now you're not only thinking about your past, your storyline, you're beginning to move forward into a tool, using a tool called a storyboard that helps you envision and own and actualize your future. And you're going to record yourself. And once you're done with that, you're going to upload the link for me. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to assess. I'll give you a bit of a grading rubric in a bit on Funda. And I'm going to assess sort of your reflection. I'm not going to evaluate your story in the sense of saying this guy's is better than this, or this person told it more with more emotion or excitement than this person did. I'm just looking for you to reflect, think, and speak. And if you do that, you'll do fine in this assignment. When you're done, your final thing, and I will put a discussion forum post, or excuse me, folder on Funda for you to write this directly into, but you need to write one final 250-word post on Funda. And essentially the question I want you to consider, I didn't even write as a question, but it is a question, and it's this one here. Where is God presently at work in your story as a leader, as well as what you have learned throughout this reflective process this term? So specifically, I'd be thinking about your story, both in the past and as you move forward into your future vision. And I want you to be thinking in a very reflective manner about that. And as you do that, post that, and that will be, as you see, about a 10% grade of your overall 25% final grade here. When is this due? This is due to be uploaded to Funda, both the post and the video link, by next Wednesday, 1 week from today at 11:55 p.m. Please note that you also need to submit via Funda a simple document that can be uploaded to Assessment 4 that reports the overall total pages that you have read in a percentage form by the time you report that. So not on time, but by the time that you report. Again, when is that due? Next Wednesday, excuse me, the 29th of October. That is the wrong date I have there. I apologize. At 11:55. Okay? Once you have done that, you are done with this course. You have, we have worked through a lot of material today. I thought I would end today just by means of reading a bit of a reflection of a recent blog post on the Storyline blog. You can Google that, from Donald Miller himself. He entitled the blog, "Your Growth May Threaten Others, Grow Anyway." Here's what he says. He says, "Every story is about one thing, the arc of the character. What I mean by that is that unless the hero changes, you've got no story. They have to be cowardly at the beginning and brave at the end, selfish at the beginning and altruistic at the end. Something in the character has to change or the audience loses interest. The reason an audience is attracted to a character that changes is because intuitively they sense their own desire to change and live vicariously through that character arc of the hero. That's one of the many reasons we love the movies. But that brings up a powerful point. You were designed to change. And if you think about it, it's irrefutable. Everything God created, from poppies to puppies, changes. Nothing stays the same even for a second. Grass grows, clouds wisp by, water flows into the ocean, guys grow beards. I'll add, may or may not be good beards. Girls become women, and some of them become moms and grandmothers. Everything God made is always in motion. The only things that aren't changing are, by definition, dead. It's true of you and me too. Remember the first time you went back home after going off to college or varsity? It might be your very first year here. Or the first time you went back home after a long summer adventure, there was likely a dissonance. Suddenly, after a series of experiences that had changed you, you went back and you felt a chasm between the way people were treating you and who you really were. They hadn't realized that you've been changed. Essentially, your mom still sees you as the 9-year-old boy or girl that you are. Even in their 30s, some people spend the night back in their family home and they want to let everyone know that their bed is made in that morning. For some, that God-given, pre-programmed process of change is stunted. And it's stunted for several reasons, all of which should be ignored. The people don't want you to change because the relationship they have with you is comfortable. And you can read several of the other points here. But I want you to see that his perspective is that people who do not change and grow and mature actually become mentally unhealthy. They begin to lack integration in the sense of the actual definition of that word, psychologically being the inner self integrated or at one with the outer self, working together hand in hand. Healthy people are integrated, unhealthy people are not. So the bottom line is that we must be willing to make others uncomfortable to become who we were meant to be. This is God's path for us. And God truly doesn't really seem to have a problem there. I feel like this is a provocative topic to end on because essentially what it's saying is that a stale character actually doesn't change. And so if you're sitting there wondering why your story isn't getting any better, my encouragement to you as you develop as a leader is that you would think through how you can tell good stories with your life. Why you are telling good stories with your life, and for what purpose or reason you're living. I feel like that gets to the core of a lot of what leadership is. Leadership flows from you, from your narrative, from your story, from your experience. And what I want to suggest is that you think about that now through the veil of a story. If there's anything else that you would like to ask or would like to do, I would highly encourage you to tell your fellow classmates to watch this tutorial, as I think it hopefully sets us up to do the assessment well and to really consider the elements of story. If not, please message me and I'll do my best to get a hold of you this week. I have had a lot of emails recently, but I want to make sure that I get to you as quickly as possible. Please take care and God bless, and I hope you are well, and that someday we can meet in person if we have not had the pleasure of doing so already. You please take care. Bye-bye.